What were you doing when you first heard the gunshots?
I was in line for the metal detectors, which are on the second level of the terminal. The shooting started from the first level down by like the ticketing counters and everything. As I understand it, he had just come in from kind of the drop-off lane just through the glass doors and started shooting from there. And I was up in line, in a long line for the metal detectors, and we heard the initial shots. Um, and From there, everybody just sort of dropped. Everyone who was up with me just sort of dropped because it was very clear that it was gunshots.
So you fell to the floor as well, or?
Yeah, we all went down. We all did. Yeah, it was pretty unmistakable what it was, and everyone just kind of dropped. And then,
How did you know that it was gunshots, though? I mean,
I mean, I guess there was no way. I guess we couldn't be certain, but it was pretty unmistakable. I mean, it was really, really loud. It was an inconsistent pattern, it wouldn't have been something mechanical or something like that. I wouldn't have suspected. It just sounded like gunshots. Like what you imagine gunshots to sound like, and in kind of the echoey space of the terminal, it was just really, really loud and pronounced and very clear. And so, I think even if people weren't absolutely certain, it was a safe bet. It was a reasonable bet that it might be, and so people just took precaution at least.
how many gunshots did you hear?
Initially 3 or 4. I remember distinctly like 3 or 4 in that initial burst, which made everybody drop, and then they continued. And once I think people, myself included, who were up on the second level, kind of understood, which came maybe a second later, understood where they were coming from. We heard them very clearly, but it was, like I say, very loud and echoey and confused and not exactly clear where they were coming from necessarily. But once that became more clear, people then got up and started pushing more into the terminal, away from the front doors, away from where the shooting was coming from, pushing through the metal detectors into like the airplane gates. And from there, people were splitting off. I remember people going down airplane bridges, people going into bathrooms, different doorways off of the main terminal hallway.
You had luggage with you?
I had a carry-on bag, and I was just about to go through the metal detector, so I had my wallet out and my ID out, and phone out, and just a carry-on like satchel bag, and
Did you lose those? You just drop those and go?
I didn't drop them until I was actually shot. I carried them with me through the metal. We were just going through the metal detectors and down into the terminal, and down there, I was about halfway down the terminal, and it was only me that I recall and 2 TSA agents at that point. Everybody else had kind of broken off into different doorways.
Running down the terminal?
Yeah. And it wasn't even a run. It was so confused. Like, should have been a run in hindsight. I should have just kept running. But, it was just so confused. You didn't know necessarily where to go. You didn't understand the situation fully, if the shooter was even coming up that far, So for me, it was kind of just a very confused, like, wandering almost, like at a hustle sort of, but like, where should I even go? What should I do? I had made it farther down than many of the people had gone before they broke off, and it was just me and, say, a couple of TSA agents. And I just got hit. I didn't see the shooter before I was hit. It just, based on the wound, it sort of hit me from the side, although I wasn't looking where the shooter was, and it just hit me. And then I dropped everything, like the bag, the phone, everything was dropped.
You said from the side, so like the back side? Or
From right here, so it's sort of the front left side of my right lower leg. So I was evidently standing sort of to the side, and actually grazed my left leg first and then hit my right leg. But I wasn't looking back where he was, so it was a complete surprise, and I didn't hear the shot that I recall. I just felt it, and it just took me off my feet.
So he was in front of you?
He was back. He had just come up the escalators, and he was back towards the metal detectors, and I was probably 25, 30 yards farther down the hallway, and not looking back that way, although evidently sort of standing sideways to him.
Mm-hmm.
No, didn't see him until after I was shot and on the ground, and I looked back.
I've never been shot. What does it feel like? I mean, not a lot of people do.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult to describe, sort of. I mean, the initial experience is like a massive impact. Like, that's the best way to describe it, I think, is it just this massive impact that just instantly took me off my feet.
Like a boulder is hitting you hard?
Like, yeah, like someone took a bat and just swung it as hard as they could at your legs, like to just dropped. It wasn't like a pinpoint kind of experience. It was just like an impact, and it just dropped. And then, just instinctually I tried to stand back up, and that didn't work. The bones in my lower leg had completely been shattered, and so there was no bone structure left on there, and I just collapsed again.
Did you immediately hurt?
No, actually. I don't remember hurting actually until a little bit later on, after I had crawled away. So after I was hit, I looked at it for a second, and it was clear I hadn't seen the shooter. I looked at it first before kind of looking at acknowledging the shooter, but given what had just happened with hearing gunshots, I assumed that that's what it was. Like it couldn't have been anything else. Like I was just shot, and looking at my leg then. At the time, it was just hanging. After I collapsed, I kind of looked at it for a second, and below the wound, my foot and leg were just hanging, just hanging off of the rest of my leg. And that's when I looked back, and I just have this snapshot image of the shooter in my mind. It just back towards the metal detectors at the other end of the hallway where I had just come from. And then I just started crawling. I actually remember in that moment, one of the things I remember very vividly, because much of it is like kind of a blurred, panicked, sort of rushed memory, but there are certain moments I remember very vividly, and that's one of them, looking back at the shooter and not seeing anybody else and just expecting to get shot again. Like looking at the floor, I remember the pattern on the carpet and just thinking, I'm about to get shot again. Because why wouldn't he? I mean, he just shot me once. I had no idea his intention was to kill just TSA agents at the time, and so I panicked. I was more afraid than I'd ever been, and I just crawled. And I don't remember it hurting so much at the time, but I distinctly remember the feeling of crawling on my hands and knees, because I was shot below my knee, and just the feeling of my leg like flopping behind me, like just dragging kind of loose behind me as I was crawling. And then I crawled down the hallway. There was like a duty-free, one of those small stores that are off the terminal, a duty-free shop. I turned into there just to get out of the hallway, continued kind of past the register and back to like a storeroom that was behind towards the back of the shop, crawled in there, closed the door. And that's when I first like really took stock of my leg, and it was bleeding badly and it was really deformed. And that's when it started to hurt also instantly, kind of just after I sort of understood how bad it was. It was, a massive hole. I could see bone, and that's when it really started to hurt. And actually, I don't remember seeing the gun. I just remember him standing. It was so quick that I don't even remember him moving. But I remember him standing, and I just remember the look on his face is like being kind of cold, like just distant. And I just remember what he was wearing and his short hair and just this snapshot of.
What was he wearing?
He had like a windbreaker on, is what I distinctly remember, and short hair. And actually, at the time, I assumed that was the shooter because I had just been shot and I didn't see anybody else. And just, like I say, instantly panicked, turned the other way and started crawling. But I actually wasn't 100% sure that it was him until later on meeting with the FBI agents who showed me some security footage that confirmed that the person I had remembered and thought might be the shooter was in fact him.
What color was the windbreaker?
It was like a dark color, like a dark blue or black. Something like that, yeah. I don't remember a lot of detail.
Was he like thin build, thick build? Was he young?
Thin. That was actually difficult. The age was difficult, in my mind, until it was clarified to me more sort of by the FBI agents. I would have thought he was older than he was, just based on my glimpse. But he is quite young. I didn't get that at the time. But yeah, slender build, Caucasian, short-haired.
What made you think that he had a cold look on his face?
Well, he just did. He just did. It was like this sternness, like this, and I cannot speak to his mindset at the time. I haven't heard any interviews with him. I don't know what his feelings were, but the look on his face that I remember was just like determined, sort of, just like a kind of a like a removed, stepped back determination, like he's just set on what he's doing,
So focused,
sort of, in a weird way. But again, that's all based on just a single glimpse. I mean, that, yeah.
You didn't know right away that was the person who was the alleged
shooter? I didn't remember acknowledging a gun in his hand. It was so quick that I don't even remember seeing a gun necessarily. So no, it wasn't. I wasn't absolutely certain that was the shooter. But based on how, kind of, like I say, his his demeanor and the fact that he was the only one there immediately after I had been shot. I assumed that was him and just didn't really study it long enough to be certain, and just turned around and started crawling. But no, I wasn't certain, and I was honest about that. I was clear about that from the beginning, that I just wasn't sure. But within a couple of days, the FBI came and spoke to me, and as they pursued their investigation and showed me some security footage, and it was definitely him.
It's kind of a haunting snapshot. So I'm having you describe it, and I'm trying to reconstruct it in my head. And I see nobody around. Is that the way?
Yeah. I don't recall anybody else. Just before getting shot, there weren't many people around. I was with a bunch of people, like I say, in the metal detector, and that's one of the things that I'm not clear on, even in the timeline of events, is where all those people had gone. My guess is in hindsight that many of them actually just stayed put, and he just moved right past them. But definitely, several people did move through the metal detectors with me and then branched off. I remember seeing that happen. But farther down the terminal, at that point, there had been nobody. They'd all branched off and not gone down as far as I did. So just before getting shot, it was just me and 2 TS agents, and then immediately after being shot, I don't remember seeing anybody.
Yeah. So you crawled into this little duty-free shop, right?
Yeah.
Crawl past the register and into a closet.
Crawled past the register to they have like a little storeroom, their little office back there with all their inventory storage and stuff. So just a little room behind the register. Crawled back there, closed the door, and there was like a little, it was like a child's sweatshirt or something back there, kind of just inside the door. And after seeing my leg and seeing how bad it was, I tied it around my leg just below my knee above the wound to try to slow some of the bleeding, and then just waited for the gunshots to stop. And
so they were still firing after you crawled into that storage room?
Not consistently that I recall. I do remember 2 distinct shots that I heard from inside the storeroom, and those I know now were actually the police shooting on the suspect and actually shooting him. And after those, I started hearing more voices. I started hearing multiple male voices, which I assumed was the police. And at that point, I was still bleeding, although it had slowed. And I was just afraid that no one would find me back there and that I might pass out or something. So after hearing the voices, I crawled back out. And at that point, like I say, it was hurting a lot. And I couldn't crawl like I had to get into the room. So actually, and this is one of the things I remember very vividly, I actually had to move my right leg, like lift it onto my left leg. So I reached down and kind of grabbed my ankle below the wound, which like I say was just loose, and put it on my left leg, and then kind of crawled out on my left hip. And one of the things I remember very vividly is the feeling of loose bone with my thumb, like feeling it with my right thumb as I moved it, and just the feeling of it being loose, like just completely detached structurally from the rest of my leg. So moved it onto my left leg and then crawled out, and just kind of got as far as having like half of my upper body sort of exposed from behind the counter, from behind the register. And I could see that there were police in the hallway, and I just called out, and they found me. Just help, like I'm in here. And initially when they came in, they were still clearing the terminal, obviously. They're like, let me see your hands, and they patted me down, and, they understandably, didn't know if I was involved or how I was involved or if I was a shooter potentially. But they quickly saw my leg and understood that I had just been shot. And 2 of them stayed with me, the 2 that had found me, and kept me there for a little while because although those last 2 shots, like I say, were of actually the shooter getting shot, we didn't know that at the time, and there was a suspicion that there might be multiple shooters. So they kept me there because the terminal wasn't clear yet. But eventually they grabbed one of those airplane terminal wheelchairs that they keep around and put me in that and got me out of there.
How long does that take?
I honestly have no idea. And I haven't really, we haven't really gone through that yet for to understand. And for me, it seemed probably much longer than it was being in that room, dealing with the wound. I remember just sitting in this pool of blood on this linoleum tile, just waiting for some kind of sign that it was over. And to me, that seemed like several minutes. Like, if I had to guess 8 to 10 minutes, it probably was not anywhere near that long, though, in reality. Then they got me out and brought me to an ambulance.
Did you think you weren't going to walk again, maybe even die there?
I definitely thought I was going to die there. I mean, not to be too dramatic about it, but at several different times, initially and most distinctly, like I said, back in the hallway, being shot first, and then seeing the shooter and having, just like I say, tried to walk instantly after getting shot and not being able to do it. So being more immobilized, relatively immobilized, and having just been shot and having the shooter just behind me with nobody else around, I really just expected to be shot again. I remember that feeling very distinctly of just bracing, like I'm about to be shot and killed, like I'm about to be shot again. Like, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't that happen? So I remember that, and then I remember being in the room and just being afraid that no one would find me in there, or that I would pass out and from blood loss or something. That one wasn't necessarily as acute a feeling, because while in there, I was still, full control of my senses and everything. It didn't, other than the leg being mangled, didn't really, still felt more or less together, and after seeing the police and having the police acknowledge me was kind of the first moment of relief that, okay, I think I'll make it. Like the instant I was hit, it was just, I remember everything exploded. Like I dropped my bag, I was holding my phone and my wallet, and my ID was separate from my wallet because I was about to go through the metal detectors and you have to show them, or I had just gone through the, how it is, you just have all that stuff out. And so I instantly dropped all of it in the hallway. And my wallet has yet to be recovered, actually. Actually, when we were in the store, like I said, I crawled back out. The police kind of pulled me, helped me get sort of more into the actual store, like into the store out from behind the register. I actually had mentioned to them that I dropped everything of mine just outside in the hallway back where I'd been shot. And one of them actually went and got it for me then, my cell phone, and brought it back to me. And then as I was getting wheelchaired out a minute later, I pointed out my bag and they brought me my bag. But the wallet, like I say, is still yet to be recovered.
So they wheeled you out onto in front of the airport entrance, right?
Yeah, in front of Terminal 3. Because like I say, it's on the second level, so we went to the elevator, down the elevator, and out the drop-off doors, back outside. But it was completely clear. Like, obviously, they were keeping that terminal completely secured and clear, and all the ambulances and fire trucks and everything that had gathered was kept back towards, I think, must have been Terminal 2, back down a little ways. So we just kept going. We came outside, saw them down there, and just kept going down to the ambulances. Yeah.
Wow. Did they immediately rush you off?
Pretty quickly. Yeah. There was like I say, a few ambulances already gathered, but just being kept away from the terminal. And they were ready, and I was immediately put into an ambulance. All my clothes were cut off. I was put into an ambulance, and we moved pretty quickly out of there.
When did you stop having to worry about your own safety or of staying alive?
I would say, like I said, the relief of when I first saw the police and that it was police, and first had that interaction with them from while I was laying on the floor, like I say, half exposed from behind that counter. They saw me and patted me down, saw that I wasn't a shooter. I would say at that moment, I thought I'd probably be okay. I'd get out of there. But then my concern changed. Actually, you had asked earlier if I thought I was going to lose my foot. That didn't occur to me until I was actually put into the ambulance. So I thought I would make it. They put me in the wheelchair. We got out of there. And then as they cut my clothes off and I got much more of a clear view of my leg, which looked awful, then I became really concerned that I would lose my foot. And I remember asking the paramedics too, who were amazing. I mean, all the first responders were incredible. I remember asking them if I thought I was going to lose my foot, and I remember this look on their face because they had just arrived. Like, I remember the one I had asked had just stepped in the ambulance. He had only looked at my leg for a second as he walked in, and so there was no way he could know for sure. But just looking at the wound, I think it definitely was questionable. I asked him if I would lose my foot, and I just remember this look on his face, like, I honestly don't know. Like, he didn't say anything, but it was just this, like, maybe, kind of look.
Wow. What did you say in response, if anything?
I didn't really respond to it. I was really grateful, I think, just to be there and to be alive, quite honestly. And there was so much. The whole situation was sort of so overwhelming that we just sort of moved on from there. And I accepted that they would do whatever they could, and from here on, it would be the best that it could be. Whatever happens. So.
Who was the last person you spoke to before all of this happened?
Who? I actually don't know, really. I couldn't say. Probably my roommate. I don't really honestly know. Because I left here sort of mid-morning, I think, to get to the flyaway, or earlier morning actually, because my flight was at 10 or something. So I was supposed to be at the airport at like 9. It was like 10:30. I was supposed to be at the airport at 9. So it was early in the morning. And
you got there about 9?
Yeah, I think I got there about 9. Yeah, I couldn't honestly say. I think probably my roommate, just because I would have left in the morning and seen him that night. Yeah.
So who did you call when you finally were able to?
In the ambulance, I called because like I say, they had brought me my cell phone, and I made my first phone call from the ambulance, and I called my mom, and then I called some people from work, actually. Yeah. I don't know. I just thought I should let someone in LA know, what's happening. I wasn't obviously expected at work until Monday, but I reasonably suspected that wouldn't be happening, and so just thought I would let them know.
What'd your mom say? What did you tell her? I mean, how do you make that phone call, right?
I know. Well, she was really composed about it. I started off by saying, I'm okay. I think that's the first thing I said is I'm okay. But
what did you tell her? Like, I got shot, and
I think she had heard about it already. I asked if she had heard about it. I was like, I think there was the shootings at LAX, and or no, I'm sorry. That was the second phone call I made when I called. That's how quickly the news travels. But like when I called my work people, they had already heard about the shooting. Didn't obviously know or assume that I would be involved. But no, I called my mom, said, don't worry, but there's been a shooting at LAX, and I was shot in the leg. And then she started asking, she's a nurse, and so she started asking, is it okay? And I was, in such a weird kind of headspace, I don't think I was answering very clearly. And so she said, just give the phone just let me talk to whoever's next to you. So I handed it to the police officer, one of the police officers who had pulled me out, rode in the ambulance with me, and I handed it to him. And she got more information from him, and then she flew out immediately and was here that night.
It's awesome that she kind of wanted to make sure that medically you were getting the right attention.
Yeah, exactly. Because I did speak to her, and I had told her that it was the leg. So I think that immediately, in her mind, being a medical person, like you say, alleviated a lot of more serious concerns that, I probably wasn't paralyzed or something more severe like that. So I think that probably alleviated a lot of the initial serious possibilities in her mind. And then it was just more questions of the actual detail and outlook.
I'm so just surprised and amazed that you had enough composure to handle the cell phone and call your mom and say, there's a shooting and I've been shot. I think I would have just stayed in a perpetual yelp for 10 minutes.
Well, it wasn't as composed as all that. I mean, those are the events that transpired, but I definitely can't say that it wasn't panicked. I was definitely terrified throughout the whole process, people have said, because I did the tourniquet and everything, oh, you knew exactly what to do. And it was not like that. It was not as like, well, first step is this, and then find cover, and then do this kind of tourniquet. It was like, I've never been that scared in my life. And my whole recollection of it is just pure panic and being terrified. And crawling into that closet was simply a matter of trying to get away from the danger and escape. And I think it's something any of us would have done just instinctually, just to try to get away. And then once I was in the ambulance, I was definitely on the verge of tears, but I called and didn't want her to worry. And so, yeah.
What'd you call your school?
I don't know, wanted to let somebody know, I knew that they would know eventually. I'd have to let them know. And, I don't know, maybe just wanted some support. I definitely wasn't, like I say, thinking very clearly and, necessarily like, who's the next person that should know? I just thought, oh, I need to let work know I'm not going to be there on Monday, kind of, I don't know.
Well, I assume from the look around this place, you have a lot of really great friends and support there anyway. So that's...
Oh, yeah. No, it's a tremendous support network there. I actually can't say enough about how the whole Las Virgenes school district where I work has come out in support. The students, the staff, the administration, it's been absolutely incredible. And I knew they would worry, and I knew they would be absolutely supportive. Of course, that's not why I called to worry them, but, I do like working there. I like working with them, and, I don't know. I just thought that they should know, and And I'm glad that I did, because they were the first people there. Like after I got out of the initial surgery and woke up, because I was pretty quickly put into surgery after I got out of the hospital. The initial surgery, they put in what they call an external fixator, because the bones in my lower leg had been completely destroyed. They put this fixator in, which is this external rod that in my case bolted in to my femur just above my knee and to the remainder of my tibia just above my ankle. And they do that just to keep the leg in the right alignment and actually at the right length, because there's no longer any bone structure there.
So they had to rebuild the bottom part of your leg?
Yeah, basically. And that's interesting. That's not something I would have thought about, but it makes sense kind of. If there's no structure left, there's nothing to keep it from kind of contracting, like muscles are deforming. So they put that in there to keep it at the right length and to roughly realign the bones and everything. But the bones were so shattered, like I say, that they weren't, they weren't perfectly lined up, but it was just more so, and to let the healing process kind of begin with everything more or less in the right place. And then in terms of the wound itself, they just put basically it's like a sponge in there and a wound vac. So it's like a sponge that they connect to a pump, and then the sponge absorbs fluids and things that the wound creates, and the pump sucks it out in order to keep the wound clean. And then the half surgery that I mentioned is just an operation where they do put you under, but it was just more exploratory. They take out the sponge and the wound vac just to kind of look. And I actually ended up having that twice because I switched hospitals. So then when I switched to Kaiser Hospital from UCLA, the doctors at Kaiser needed to see it as well. But that operation is just exploratory in preparation for the final surgery. They need to go in and see kind of what the bone damage is. The orthopedic surgeon looks at that, and then the plastic surgeons look at like what they need to do in terms of filling the void with the muscle flap, and then what the skin graft, and just basically exploratory, looking at what they need to do later on. And then the final surgery was putting in a rod and then doing a muscle flap, which is where they, in my case, took muscle from the back of my calf, the soleus muscle, took part of it and moved it around to the front in order to fill the void, because so much tissue was destroyed. In order for the bone to be able to heal, it needs blood flow all around it, and so they moved the muscle from the back around to the front to just fill that hole, and then put a skin graft over that. That was the final surgery, those three things: putting the metal rod, the muscle flap, and the skin graft, and then realigning the tibia fragments around the rod in order to give them a chance to heal.
What's it like not being able to move freely the way you've always been able to?
It's a new experience. I'm trying to keep a positive spin on it, and I definitely think it's a healthy perspective in some ways to have to struggle and understand what truthfully some people deal with their entire lives in terms of immobility. But it is a struggle. It is improving. Initially I had virtually no movement, and it was excruciatingly painful just to have it vertical. I'm not putting any weight on it, but just to say be up in a walker or crutches and have it vertical was incredibly painful. And so there was no movement at first, and then it just slowly started to build. I'd have to have someone move my leg for me in order to get to make a transfer from like a chair to the wheelchair to the bed or something like that. And it has improved. Now I'm to the point now where I can get myself up onto crutches or a walker and get myself to the bathroom and things. Still not putting any weight on it, but the pain is manageable enough now in terms of having it vertical that I can do that for myself. Wow. So it's a challenge. It's just a challenge. You have to just think so much more about your day-to-day activities. Like if I'm moving from the bed to the chair in the living room, like what do I need to bring with me? Because it's not so easy for me to go back there and get what I may have forgotten. So I carry a backpack with me now everywhere I go that has all my medication and like cell phone and, wallet and everything that I might need because I can't go back so easily. So it's just a lot more forethought and planning. And then when you get to where you're going, do you have everything you need? Like I need to keep my foot elevated. Do I have something to do that with, when I get there? So it's a challenge. It's just a challenge, but it's improving.
Are you mad at
I'm
the
not.
guy?
I'm not, actually, and I haven't been. I'm not mad at the shooter. He's obviously disturbed. I don't know in what way specifically, but you would have to be disturbed. You would have to be unstable in some way in order to make these kinds of choices and think the way he was evidently thinking, and that's not something I think that was in his control, to his instability. I am angry that instability wasn't addressed sooner, maybe, that he, again, I don't know the exact details of his situation, but that maybe he didn't have the resources he might have had, that, again, people didn't identify this in him earlier on. And then also mad that he was able to get a weapon like the one he had, especially given his condition. That's what I'm mad at. I'm sort of mad at the system more than I am mad at him.
When you say the resources, what do you mean by that?
Oh, like the mental care that I think he needed, medication or therapy or whatever that might have been, given his specific situation, that it just wasn't being addressed. I think that, but I also know that it's not a perfect, like, instability, mental disease. I'm no expert, again, but I also know that that's not a perfect science, and it doesn't always manifest itself in the same way or in very obvious ways. And there's a first time for everything, so it's difficult to say. I think each situation is different. He had never had any history of that, that I've been aware of to this point. So there was no reason to suspect him of doing something like this or to prohibit him from having a gun under our current laws. I did think that I just didn't want to die. There was this feeling of, as soon as it happened, that I can't believe that this just happened. I think we all have this sense of, not invulnerability, but like, just never expect this to happen to you, and it's impossible to imagine what that experience is like when it does. And so the moment it happened, it was like this instant vulnerability, this instant, like, I don't know, it's really difficult to describe. Like, all of a sudden I really could die, which is an experience I've never had before,
and like this, you never thought before this could happen to you, but it
like
happens to other people.
Yeah. And we go through life with plans and expectations and goals and assumptions that, like, oh, next year I'm going to do this. And then, eventually my life will be like this. And you have all these aspirations. And then in an instant that there's a possibility that could not be there, like, instantly. And so I think my feeling was that I just don't want to die. Like, all of a sudden all that could go away. Like, in this moment, all that could be over. All this, like, just normal going through life, these goals, these plans, my hopes, like, all that could be gone. And it's just like this instant awareness, like this instant kind of vulnerability, and it was terrifying, and I just didn't want to die. I didn't really think in terms of, like, regrets or things I hadn't done, but just that I didn't want to die.
No, you were looking forward. Still. What could come. So not bad. I'm also amazed that you're not mad. That's amazing. It takes a lot of courage to not be mad at that. Were you mad at any point? I mean, did you just come to that conclusion that, what, I'm not mad at this situation or him or what's happened to me? Were you mad at any point and have just come to this conclusion?
I'm frustrated, I think, day to day sometimes with, like, the immobility, like the day-to-day things, and frustrated that this happened to me and that I have to deal with this now for the next however many months. But big picture, I've never been mad at any point with the shooter. I'm not an expert in mental instability, but my dad's a psychiatrist, and it's something that I've been around in that way, I guess, in that capacity as the son of a psychiatrist for a while, and having their much more clinical, kind of objective look on mental instability. I don't know, it's just painted this picture for me of it's a disease, whatever he has, I think must be a disease of some kind, and these actions are just a manifestation or just a outcome of whatever state he's in. And I don't think any of us would choose to be in that state, him included. I think it's something that he can't help and hasn't been receiving help for. And it's just a shame that in his state he decided that this was the right thing to do and a good thing to do. So no, I'm not mad at him, because I don't think he was capable of making rational choices. And I'm just mad that in his state, being someone like that he was not getting the help that he needed, and that also he was able to get a gun and act on these irrational choices.